My name is Robert Hayes, and I turned 58 this past March on a Tuesday morning that came in cold and gray, the way most mornings do in Dayton, Ohio when winter refuses to let go. I woke up at 5:15, like I have every working day since 1988, made my coffee in the same chipped mug Emily gave me for Father's Day when she was 7, and stood at the kitchen window watching the pre-dawn light struggle against the clouds rolling in from Indiana. The house was silent in that particular way that tells you nobody else is awake, a silence I'd grown accustomed to over the years. After Martha passed in 2003, silence became my most constant companion. I'd learned to fill it with routines, with purpose, with the steady rhythm of a life built on work and responsibility. The floorboards in the hallway still creaked in the same 3 spots. The radiator in the living room still clanked when it kicked on. The photograph of Martha and me at Niagara Falls still hung crooked, no matter how many times I straightened it. I built this house with my own 2 hands, or at least rebuilt most of it. When Martha and I bought the place in 1985, it was a fixer-upper on the outskirts of Dayton, not far from where I grew up on my father's farm. The roof leaked, the foundation had cracks you could fit your fist through, and the previous owners had left it in such a state that the bank practically gave it away. But I saw potential where others saw problems. I saw a place where I could raise a family, where my children could run through fields of corn in the summer and build snowmen in the winter, where the American flag could hang on the porch and mean something. Every weekend for 3 years, I worked on that house. I replaced every rotted board in the porch, ripped out the old plumbing and installed new pipes, tore down walls and rebuilt them straight and true. Martha would bring me sandwiches and sweet tea while I worked, Emily toddling around in her little overalls, trying to help by handing me nails that she'd drop more often than not. Those were good years, years when the work felt like it meant something, when every drop of sweat was an investment in our future. I started at General Motors right out of high school in 1985. My father wanted me to take over the farm, but I'd seen how hard that life was, how the weather and the banks could crush a man, no matter how hard he worked. The GM plant in Moraine was hiring, and the pay was good, better than anything I could make working the land. I started on the line doing sub-assembly work, installing door panels on Chevy Blazers. The work was repetitive, mind-numbing even, but it was honest and it was steady. Over 35 years, I watched that plant change. I saw automation come in and take jobs from men who'd worked there longer than I had. I saw the recession hit in 2008 and watched friends get laid off, their families torn apart by unemployment and desperation. I survived 3 rounds of layoffs by being reliable, by never calling in sick unless I was dying, by taking every overtime shift they offered even when my back screamed and my hands ached. The plant was scheduled to close permanently next year, 2026. They'd been talking about it for months, and most of us had seen it coming. The writing was on the wall when they stopped hiring new workers 5 years ago. But I'd made it this far, close enough to retirement, that my pension would be safe. I'd done the math 100 times, sitting at the kitchen table with my calculator and the benefit statements they sent out every year. If I could hold on until December, I'd walk away with full benefits and my retirement savings intact. That retirement savings was substantial. Over 35 years of working overtime, of skipping vacations and driving used cars and eating leftovers, I'd managed to put away almost $400,000. It was more money than my father had seen in his entire life, more money than I'd ever imagined having when I was a kid growing up in a farmhouse with no indoor plumbing. That money was my legacy, my gift to Emily, the proof that a working man could still build something meaningful in America if he was willing to sacrifice. Emily was my only child. Martha and I had wanted more kids, but after Emily was born, the doctors told us there couldn't be any more. Complications, they called it, though the details didn't matter much. What mattered was that Emily became the center of our universe, the focus of every hope and dream we had. We spoiled her, I admit that now. Every Christmas was bigger than the last. Every birthday had to be special. When she wanted to take dance lessons, I worked double shifts to pay for them. When she wanted to go to summer camp, I picked up weekend work at the hardware store. After Martha died, Emily was all I had left. She was 13 when we lost her mother to breast cancer, right at that age where a girl needs her mom the most. I tried my best to fill both roles, to be both father and mother, but I knew I was failing. I could see it in the way Emily withdrew, the way she spent hours alone in her room, the way she stopped talking about her day at school. I blamed myself, wondered if I'd been too focused on work, too absent during the years when Martha was fighting her illness. But Emily was strong, stronger than I gave her credit for. She threw herself into her studies, got straight A's through high school, played volleyball well enough to make varsity her sophomore year. She was popular too, always had friends calling the house, always had plans on Friday nights. I made sure she had everything she needed. A car when she turned 16, the latest phone, nice clothes. I wanted her to know that even without her mother, she'd never go without. She got accepted to Ohio State University in Columbus, about an hour-and-a-half drive from Dayton. Full ride for academics, which made me proud enough to burst. But she wanted to live on campus, wanted the full college experience, and I couldn't say no even though the dorms cost extra and the meal plan was highway robbery. I took out a second mortgage on the house to cover the expenses her scholarship didn't, telling myself it was worth it, that education was the best investment a father could make. Those 4 years while Emily was at Ohio State were lonely ones. I'd call her every Sunday night, but the conversations got shorter and shorter. She was busy, she had papers to write, she had study groups to attend. I understood, or at least I told myself I did. When she came home for holidays, she'd spend most of her time with her friends, sleeping until noon and going out until 3 in the morning. I'd make her favorite meals, pot roast with potatoes and carrots the way Martha used to make it. But Emily would push the food around her plate and say she wasn't hungry. She'd eaten before coming home. She graduated last May with a degree in communications. I drove up to Columbus for the ceremony, sat in those uncomfortable bleachers for 3 hours waiting to hear her name called. When they finally announced Emily Louise Hayes, I stood up and cheered louder than anyone else there. Didn't care who heard me or what they thought. She walked across that stage in her cap and gown, and for a moment, I saw Martha's smile on her face, saw the little girl who used to fall asleep on my shoulder during car rides. After graduation, Emily moved back home. She said it was temporary, just until she found a job and saved up some money for an apartment. I was thrilled, honestly. Having her back in the house, hearing footsteps upstairs, having someone to cook for besides myself, it felt like a second chance. I cleaned out the guest room, bought new sheets and a comforter, moved my old army stuff down to the basement to make room for her things. But something was different about Emily. The girl who came back from college wasn't the same one who'd left 4 years earlier. She slept until 2 in the afternoon, stayed up until dawn scrolling through her phone. She'd leave dirty dishes in her room for days until I couldn't take it anymore and brought them down myself. When I asked about her job search, she'd snap at me, tell me she was working on it, tell me I didn't understand how hard the job market was for her generation. She started dating Marcus Jennings in July. He was 24, worked at his uncle's car dealership in Kettering, drove a BMW that I was pretty sure he couldn't actually afford. I didn't like him from the first time I met him. Something about the way he looked at my house, at my furniture, at me. Like we were all beneath him somehow, like he was doing Emily a favor by being with her. He had this smirk, this way of half smiling when I talked that made me feel like he was laughing at me. Emily changed even more after she started seeing Marcus. She started dressing differently, spending money she didn't have on clothes and makeup. She'd go out with him 3-4 nights a week, coming home at dawn smelling like alcohol and cheap cologne. When I tried to talk to her about it, about maybe slowing down, about focusing on her future, she'd roll her eyes and tell me I was old-fashioned, that I didn't understand her generation. The tension in the house grew like mold in a damp basement. slowly at first, but then faster and more pervasive until it seemed to be everywhere. Small arguments became bigger ones. I'd ask her to do the dishes, and she'd tell me she was too busy. I'd suggest she might want to consider applying for jobs outside of Dayton, maybe in Columbus or Cincinnati, and she'd accuse me of trying to kick her out. The worst part was that I could feel her pulling away, could see the distance growing between us, and I didn't know how to bridge it. She started asking for money in August. Small amounts at first, $20 for gas, $50 for a concert ticket. I gave it to her without question, happy that she was asking instead of just taking. But the requests got bigger. $100 for a weekend trip with Marcus. $200 for car repairs that I offered to do myself, but she insisted needed to be done at a professional shop. $300 for textbooks for an online course she claimed to be taking, though I never saw her study or heard her mention the class again. By September, I'd given her over $2,000, and my savings account was starting to look thin. I'd always been careful with money, always made sure I had a cushion for emergencies, but between the requests and the regular household expenses, I was dipping into funds I'd earmarked for retirement. I knew I needed to say no, needed to set boundaries, but every time I tried, I'd see Martha's face in my mind, hear her voice telling me to take care of our little girl. The breaking point came in late September. Emily approached me on a Thursday evening, just as I was settling in to watch the evening news. Marcus was with her, which should have been my first warning sign. She had this look on her face, excited and nervous at the same time, and I knew she was about to ask for something big. "Dad," she said, sitting down on the couch next to me while Marcus leaned against the doorframe. "Marcus and I have been talking, and we really want to take a trip to Florida for a week. There's this amazing deal on a resort in Miami Beach, and it would be so good for me to just relax before I really dive into the job hunt." I looked at her, then at Marcus, then back at her. "Emily, sweetheart, you've been relaxing for 4 months. Don't you think it might be time to focus on finding work instead of going on vacation?" Her face hardened, that look I'd seen so many times lately, the one that said I was being unreasonable. "Dad, you don't get it. I've been stressed about the job hunt. I need a break. Besides, Marcus is paying for most of it. I just need you to put the hotel on your credit card. It's only $1,500, and I'll pay you back as soon as I get a job." $1,500. I thought about the bills sitting on my desk, the property taxes due next month, the notice from GM about changes to our healthcare benefits. I thought about all the money I'd already given her, all the promises to pay me back that had never materialized. "No," I said, and the word felt foreign in my mouth, like speaking a language I'd forgotten. "Emily, I can't do that. That's too much money, and you haven't paid me back for anything else I've lent you." The silence that followed was deafening. Emily's face went from surprise to angry in the space of a heartbeat. "Are you serious right now? After everything you've done, you're going to nickel and dime me over a vacation? Everything I've done?" I felt my own anger rising, years of biting my tongue suddenly too much to bear. "Emily, I've given you everything. I paid for your college. I gave you a place to live rent-free. I've handed you thousands of dollars over the past 4 months. I'm not nickel and diming you. I'm asking you to be responsible." Marcus pushed off from the doorframe, that smirk I hated spreading across his face. "Come on, Emily. I told you this would happen. Your old man's too cheap to want you to be happy." That was it. That was the moment I should have thrown him out of my house, should have put my foot down and established boundaries that should have been there all along. But I didn't. I just sat there, watching as Emily stood up, her face red with anger. "You know what, Dad? You're right. You have given me everything. This house, this life, everything. And maybe that's the problem. Maybe I'm tired of you holding it over my head, tired of you acting like I owe you something for being a father." Those words hit me like a physical blow. I'd never asked her for gratitude, never kept a tally of what I'd spent or sacrificed. I'd done it because I loved her, because that's what fathers do. But hearing her say it like that, like I'd been holding her hostage with my generosity, it broke something inside me. "Get out," I said quietly. What? Not you, I said, looking at Marcus. Him. Get him out of my house. Emily's eyes went wide, then narrowed. If he leaves, I leave. Then I guess you're both leaving. It was a bluff. A stupid, desperate bluff, and she called it immediately. Fine, she said, grabbing Marcus's hand. Come on, we'll go stay at your place. They left, and the house fell silent again. But this time the silence felt different. It felt like failure, like the end of something I couldn't quite name. I sat on the couch for a long time after they left, the TV still playing the news. Stories about things happening in a world that suddenly felt very far away. She came back 3 hours later, alone. I heard her key in the lock, heard her footsteps in the hallway, but I didn't get up from the couch. She appeared in the doorway to the living room, and I could see she'd been crying. Dad, I'm sorry. I didn't mean what I said. I wanted to forgive her immediately, wanted to pull her into a hug and tell her everything was okay. But something stopped me, some newfound backbone I didn't know I had. Did you mean what you said about me holding things over your head? She hesitated, and that hesitation told me everything I needed to know. Sometimes it feels like that, she admitted. Like you're keeping score, like every nice thing you do comes with strings attached. That hurt more than her anger had. Emily, I've never kept score. Everything I've done because I love you. Because you're my daughter and I want you to have a good life. I know, she said, and she sounded tired. I know that, Dad. I just ... I don't know how to explain it. Sometimes it feels suffocating, like I'll never be able to live up to what you've sacrificed. Like I'll always be in your debt. We talked for another hour that night, and by the end, we'd reached an uneasy truce. She agreed to start seriously job hunting, and I agreed to stop bringing up money she owed me. It felt like progress, like maybe we were finding our way back to each other. I should have known it wouldn't last. The Friday before Thanksgiving came in cold and clear, the kind of November day that makes you grateful for heated car seats and insulated coffee mugs. I woke up early as always, but this time with a sense of anticipation that had been missing for months. Tonight was the big game, the annual matchup between Dayton High and our crosstown rivals from Kettering, and I'd been looking forward to it for weeks. In Dayton, high school football isn't just a sport, it's a religion. Every Friday night from September through November, the stands at Municipal Stadium fill up with families who've been coming to these games for generations. I'd played defensive line for Dayton High back in the early '80s, and though we never made it to state, those Friday nights under the lights were some of the best memories of my youth. After Emily was born, I'd brought her to games in a carrier, then in a stroller, then holding my hand as she toddled along the bleachers. By the time she was in high school herself, she'd roll her eyes at my enthusiasm, but I always caught her smiling when the band played the fight song. I hadn't been to a game since Emily graduated. It felt wrong somehow, going without her. But this year, something made me want to go back. Maybe it was nostalgia. Maybe it was a desire to reconnect with the community I'd been neglecting. Or maybe I just wanted to feel young again, to remember a time when life was simpler, and the biggest worry I had was whether we'd beat Kettering. I mentioned it to Emily at breakfast that morning. She was up unusually early, sitting at the kitchen table scrolling through her phone while I made eggs and toast. I'd noticed she'd been in a better mood lately, more like her old self. She'd even applied for a few jobs, had an interview lined up at a marketing firm in Dayton for next week. Things were looking up. I'm thinking about going to the game tonight, I said, sliding a plate of eggs in front of her. Dayton versus Kettering. Should be a good one. She looked up from her phone, surprised. Really? You haven't been to a game in forever. Figured it was time. Want to come? We could make it a thing, get some hot dogs, sit in our old seats. For a moment, I saw interest flicker in her eyes, saw the girl who used to cheer along with the crowd, even though she claimed not to care about football. Then her phone buzzed, and the moment passed. I can't tonight, she said, looking back at her screen. Marcus and I have plans. What kind of plans? Just plans, Dad. We're probably going to hang out at his place, watch a movie or something. I felt a twinge of disappointment but pushed it aside. That's fine. Maybe next time. Yeah, maybe. The day passed slowly. I did some work around the house, fixed a loose board on the porch, cleaned out the gutters one last time before winter really set in. Around 4 o'clock I took a shower and changed into my Dayton Wildcat sweatshirt, the one I'd had since the 90s that was faded and worn but still warm. I made myself a sandwich for dinner, figuring I'd get something at the game too because the smell of stadium food was half the experience. I left the house at 6, giving myself plenty of time to find parking and get a good seat. The temperature had dropped with the sun, and my breath fogged in the cold air as I walked from my truck to the stadium. The lights were already on, bright white against the darkening sky, and I could hear the band warming up, brass instruments competing with drums in a cacophony that somehow sounded like home. The ticket booth was manned by Mrs. Patterson, who'd been taking tickets at these games for 30 years. She recognized me immediately. "Robert Hayes. Haven't seen you in a dog's age. How've you been?" "Can't complain, Mrs. Patterson. Thought it was time I came back to see the boys play." "Well, you picked a good night for it. Kettering's supposed to be tough this year, but our boys are tougher. Go Wildcats." "Go Wildcats," I echoed, taking my ticket and heading into the stadium. The stands were already half full, families bundled in winter coats and blankets, kids running up and down the bleachers with that limitless energy that only children possess. I found a spot about halfway up, right on the 50-yard line where I used to sit with Martha and Emily. The seat was cold through my jeans, and I wished I'd brought a cushion, but the discomfort faded as I watched the field come alive. The team burst through the banner to thunderous applause, and I felt something stir in my chest, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Pride, maybe, connection, a sense of belonging to something larger than myself. The national anthem played, and I stood with my hand over my heart, looking at the flag whipping in the cold November wind, thinking about my time in the Army, about my father and his service in Korea, about all the men in my family who'd answered when their country called. The game started, and I lost myself in it completely. Every first down was a small victory, every touchdown an explosion of joy. I cheered until my throat was raw, high-fived strangers when we scored, groaned with everyone else when Kettering tied it up in the third quarter. For 3 hours, I wasn't a factory worker facing retirement, wasn't a widower raising a troubled daughter. I was just another fan, part of a community united by something as simple and beautiful as high school football. We won in the final seconds on a field goal, and the crowd erupted. People were hugging, cheering, crying even. The band played the fight song, and without thinking about it, I sang along, remembering every word from decades ago. As I filed out of the stadium with everyone else, I felt lighter than I had in months, maybe years. The house was dark when I got home around 9:30. Emily's car was in the driveway, which surprised me. I'd expected her to still be out with Marcus. I let myself in through the kitchen door, hung my keys on the hook by the phone, and was about to head upstairs when I heard voices from the living room. Emily's voice, high and excited. "I'm telling you, he won't even notice. He keeps the checkbook in his desk drawer. Doesn't even look at it half the time." My blood ran cold. I stood frozen in the kitchen, listening. Marcus's voice, that smug tone I'd come to hate. "And you're sure it'll work? What if he checks his account? He barely knows how to use a computer, Marcus. By the time he figures out what happened, we'll be back from Florida with tans and matching stories. Besides, it's not like he needs all that money. He's got his pension coming, and it's not like he goes anywhere or does anything. He just sits in this house like some sad old man waiting to die." The words hit me like punches, each one landing with devastating accuracy. This was my daughter, my Emily, the girl I'd raised, the one I'd sacrificed everything for, and she was planning to steal from me. Not just money, but my retirement, my security, my future. I should have confronted them right then. Should have walked into that living room and thrown Marcus out. Should have told Emily exactly what I thought of her and her plan. But something kept me rooted to the spot. Some combination of shock and heartbreak that made my legs refuse to move. "What about your dad?" Marcus asked. "What if he figures it out before we go?" Emily laughed, and the sound was cruel. "What's he going to do? Kick me out? He'd never. He needs me here as much as I need his money. Maybe more. He's got nobody else, Marcus. I'm all he has. That gives me power, whether he knows it or not." That's when the anger finally came, hot and bright and clarifying. I walked into the living room, and they both jumped, guilty expressions flashing across their faces before Emily managed to school hers into something approaching innocence. "Dad, I thought you were at the game?" "I was," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "We won. Field goal in the final seconds. It was a good game." "Oh, that's great," she said, but I could see the calculation in her eyes, could see her trying to figure out how much I'd heard. "I think you should leave," I said to Marcus. "We were just watching a movie," Emily said quickly. "I heard what you were talking about." Every word. The silence that followed was absolute. Emily's face went pale, then red, her mouth opening and closing like she was trying to find words that wouldn't come. Marcus, to his credit, had the decency to look ashamed, though it might have just been fear. "Dad, I can explain." "Get out," I said to Marcus, my voice harder now. "Get out of my house right now, or I'm calling the police and reporting what I just heard." Marcus scrambled up from the couch, grabbing his jacket. "Look, man, it wasn't my idea. I don't care whose idea it was. Get out." He practically ran for the door, and I heard his car start up seconds later, tires squealing as he pulled away. Emily stood up, and I could see tears forming in her eyes, but I felt nothing. No sympathy, no desire to comfort her. Just a cold, hard certainty that something fundamental had broken between us. "Dad, please let me explain. I wasn't actually going to do it. We were just talking, just joking around. Don't lie to me, Emily. Not now. You've lied enough." "I'm not lying. I would never actually steal from you." "But you've thought about it," I said. "That's what you were doing in there. Planning how to steal my retirement money so you could go to Florida with that piece of trash. Making fun of me, calling me a sad old man. I didn't mean it like that." "How did you mean it then?" "Because from where I'm standing, it sounded pretty clear." She was crying now, real tears streaming down her face, but I couldn't find it in myself to care. Every sacrifice I'd made, every hour of overtime, every missed opportunity and denied pleasure, all of it had been for her, and this was how she repaid me. Not just with ingratitude, but with contempt, with cruelty, with plans to rob me blind. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I don't know what I was thinking. Marcus, he gets in my head sometimes, makes me think things that aren't right. Don't blame Marcus for this. You were the one talking about how I wouldn't notice, how I'm too stupid to use a computer. Those were your words, Emily, your thoughts. I was showing off. I was trying to sound cool in front of my boyfriend. By making fun of your father? By planning to rob me?" She had no answer for that, just stood there crying, mascara running down her face, looking young and lost and utterly unfamiliar to me. "I want you to think very carefully about what you do next," I said, my voice calm in a way that surprised me. "Because the decisions you make tonight are going to determine what kind of relationship we have going forward. If we have one at all." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I've given you everything, Emily, everything I had to give and more. And you've taken it all and asked for more and apparently thought so little of me that you were planning to steal from me. So now I need to figure out if you're worth continued investment, or if it's time to cut my losses. You're talking about me like I'm a business deal. Maybe that's all we are at this point, a transaction. You take, I give, and nothing I give is ever enough." The truth of those words hung in the air between us, undeniable and devastating. Emily sank back onto the couch, her crying intensifying. But I remained standing, looking at this stranger who wore my daughter's face. "I'm going to bed," I said finally. "When I wake up tomorrow, I want you to have made a decision. Either you're going to stay here and genuinely change, Genuinely contribute to this household and show me some respect, or you're going to leave and figure out life on your own. But if you stay, it's going to be on my terms. No more Marcus. No more sleeping until afternoon. No more treating this house like a hotel. You'll get a job, any job, within 2 weeks. You'll contribute to household expenses. And you'll show me that I didn't waste 35 years of my life raising someone who thinks I'm a sad old man to be exploited. I walked to the stairs, my legs feeling heavy, my heart heavier. Behind me, I could hear Emily crying, could hear her calling my name, but I didn't turn around. I climbed the stairs to my bedroom, closed the door, and sat on the edge of the bed that Martha and I had shared for 18 years, the bed I'd slept in alone for 22. I didn't cry. I was too tired to cry, too numb to feel much of anything beyond a deep, bone-deep disappointment. I'd failed her somehow, I knew that. Failed to teach her empathy. Failed to instill values that ran deeper than surface pleasures. Or maybe I'd succeeded too well at protecting her, at shielding her from consequences until she believed there were no consequences, not for her. I thought about Martha then, about what she would have said if she'd been here. Would she have been harder on Emily or softer? Would she have seen this coming? Found some way to prevent it? I'd never know, and that ignorance felt like its own kind of failure. The house gradually fell silent. I heard Emily moving around downstairs for a while, heard her go into the kitchen, heard water running. Eventually, I heard her footsteps on the stairs, heard her bedroom door close. I wondered if she was crying still, if she was angry or scared or plotting something else. I wondered if I cared. I lay down on top of the covers, still fully dressed, and stared at the ceiling. The room was dark except for the streetlight outside casting shadows through the curtains. The same shadows that had danced across the ceiling for 40 years. Everything was the same as it had always been, and yet everything had changed. Somewhere around midnight, I finally fell asleep. My dreams filled with the sound of cheering crowds and the smell of autumn air, of Friday nights that felt like forever, and daughters who smiled like they meant it. I woke the next morning to the sound of yelling. It took me a moment to orient myself, to remember where I was and why my body ached from sleeping in my clothes. Then Emily's voice, shrill and angry, cut through the fog of sleep. "You're pathetic, you know that? Pathetic and controlling." I sat up, my back protesting, and checked the clock on the knitstand. 7:30 in the morning, barely light outside. I could hear Marcus's voice too, lower but equally angry, and my stomach dropped. He was here, in my house, despite everything I'd said last night. I got up, every muscle stiff, and opened my bedroom door. The yelling was coming from the living room. I made my way down the stairs, gripping the railing, and found them exactly where I'd left them the night before. Emily on the couch, Marcus standing by the window, both of them turning to face me as I entered. "What is he doing here?" I asked, my voice rough from sleep. "We're leaving," Emily announced, standing up. She was wearing the same clothes from last night, her face puffy from crying, but her expression was hard, determined. "We're going to Florida, and you can't stop us." "Emily." "No, Dad, I'm done. I'm done with your judgments and your rules and your disappointed looks. I'm an adult. I can make my own decisions. Not with my money, you can't." Marcus stepped forward, and I saw that smirk again, that look that made my hands clench into fists. "She doesn't need your money, old man. I've got enough for both of us. Is that right? Because from what I heard last night, you were both pretty interested in my retirement fund." "That was just talk," Emily said. "We weren't actually going to do anything. So you're just going to take Marcus's money instead? What about the job interview you have on Monday? I'll reschedule, or I won't. I don't know. I just need to get away from here, away from you and your constant disappointment." The words stung, but I'd armored myself against them overnight. "If you walk out that door with him, Emily, don't expect to come back." She laughed, high and bitter. "Oh, now you're kicking me out? After years of guilt-tripping me about how much you sacrificed. After making sure I knew every single thing you ever did for me. I never guilt-tripped you. Are you kidding?" Every conversation we've had since I graduated has been about what you've done for me, how hard you've worked, how much you've given up. You know what, Dad? I didn't ask for any of that. I didn't ask you to work yourself to death, or to save every penny, or to put your life on hold. You did all that, and then you made it my problem. The accusation hit home in a way I didn't expect. Had I done that? Made her responsible for my choices, my sacrifices? I'd thought I was just being a good father, doing what fathers do. But standing there, seeing the genuine pain and anger in her eyes, I had to wonder if she was right. If I'd somehow turned love into obligation, generosity into guilt. Emily, sweetheart, I'm sorry if that's how you felt. That was never my intention. I did everything I did because I loved you, not because I expected something back. But you did expect something back, she shot back. You expected gratitude. You expected obedience. You expected me to be the perfect daughter who never disappointed you, who lived up to all the sacrifices you made. Well, guess what? I can't do that. I'm not perfect, and I'm tired of trying to be. Marcus put his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. Come on, baby. Let's just go. He's not worth it. Don't talk about my father like that, Emily said, but there was no heat in it. She looked at me, and for a moment, I saw something in her eyes that might have been regret. I'll be back for my things later, when you're not here. Emily, please, don't do this. Let's just talk, figure this out. There's nothing to figure out. Dad, I'm leaving. And then before I could process what was happening, she pulled something from her pocket. My spare key, the one I kept in the kitchen junk drawer for emergencies. She was holding it up, looking at it, and then at me. You know what? I don't even want to come back for my things. I don't want any of it, anything that came from you and your sacrifices. In one swift motion, she threw the key. It arced through the air, and I watched in slow motion as it sailed past me, through the open door to the guest bedroom. I heard it land with a small metallic sound, and then Emily was moving, pushing past me, Marcus right behind her. Emily, wait, but she didn't wait. She ran upstairs. I heard her in her room throwing things into a bag, and then she was back down, past me again, heading for the front door. Marcus was already outside, starting his car. She paused at the threshold, looked back at me one more time. I'll call you, she said, when I'm ready. When I've had time to figure out who I am without you defining me. Emily. The door slammed. I stood there, rooted to the spot, listening to the car start, listening to it pull away. The house fell silent again, that particular silence that comes after violence, after a storm. I stood in my living room, in my wrinkled clothes, alone, my daughter gone, the spare key to my house somewhere in the guest bedroom. I should have felt angry, should have felt betrayed or hurt or any of the emotions that had consumed me last night, but all I felt was tired. Tired and old and wondering where exactly everything had gone so wrong. I went to the guest bedroom, thinking I'd find the key easily. It was a small room, just a bed and a dresser and a closet full of boxes I'd been meaning to go through for years. But as I stood in the doorway, I realized I had no idea where the key had landed. I heard it hit something, but the room was dark and my eyes hadn't adjusted. I searched for a few minutes, moving boxes, looking under the bed, checking the corners. Nothing. The key had vanished, swallowed by the clutter and shadow of a room I rarely entered. Frustrated, I gave up, figuring I'd find it later when I had more energy and better light. I went back to my bedroom, planning to change out of yesterday's clothes, maybe take a shower, try to clear my head. But as I reached my door, I heard something behind me. A click. I turned around just in time to see the guest bedroom door swinging shut, pushed by a draft from the heating vent in the ceiling. I watched it close, heard the latch engage, and felt a cold certainty wash over me. I crossed the hallway in 3 steps and tried the knob. Locked. The old-fashioned keyhole lock that we'd installed decades ago because Martha wanted the guest room to have a lock for privacy when family visited. The kind that locked from the inside, but could also be locked from the outside with a key. The key that Emily had just thrown into that room before leaving. I stood there for a long moment, processing the absurdity of it. My daughter had thrown the spare house key into a locked room, and that draft had pushed the door shut behind it. The only other copy of that key was on my keyring, currently in my pocket. The only key to the guest room was somewhere in that room, along with the spare house key. It would have been funny if it wasn't so perfectly awful, so precisely symbolic of the situation I found myself in. Locked out of my own guest room by my own daughter's parting gesture, the very key that would grant me access trapped on the other side of a door I couldn't open. I tried the knob a few more times, knowing it was futile. The lock was solid, the door well made. I'd installed it myself 20 years ago, built it to last. I could force it, break it down, but something stopped me. Some combination of exhaustion and dark humor and the feeling that breaking down a door in my own house was the perfect metaphor for everything else that was broken in my life. Instead, I went downstairs, made coffee, and sat at the kitchen table. The morning light was stronger now, streaming through the windows, illuminating the empty house. I thought about Emily, probably on the highway by now, heading to Florida with Marcus. I thought about the retirement savings I'd protected, the job I'd go back to on Monday, the life I'd built that suddenly seemed very hollow. My phone rang around 9. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered anyway. Mr. Hayes? This is Detective Sarah Mitchell from the Dayton Police Department. We've received a call about a potential fraud involving your credit card. Do you have a few minutes to talk? My stomach dropped. What kind of fraud? Well, sir, that's what we're trying to determine. We had a report from a Marcus Jennings claiming that someone, possibly your daughter, was planning to use your credit card fraudulently. He said he wanted to report it before it happened. Can you confirm whether you've given your daughter Emily Hayes permission to use your credit card? I closed my eyes, feeling the world shift beneath me. Marcus had turned Emily in, or he was covering his own tracks, or both. Whatever his motivation, Emily was now potentially facing fraud charges for something she hadn't actually done, something I'd overheard them discussing, but that hadn't materialized. Detective, I need to call you back. This is a family matter, and I need some time to sort it out. I understand, sir, but if there's an active fraud situation, there isn't. I can assure you of that. My daughter is not committing fraud. This is a misunderstanding. Mr. Jennings seemed quite certain. Mr. Jennings is no longer welcome in my home, and I question his motives in calling you. If there are any questions about my accounts or my daughter's access to them, please contact me directly. Is that clear? There was a pause then. Yes, sir, clear. But if you could come by the station at some point this week to make a formal statement, that would be helpful. I'll do that. Thank you, Detective. I hung up and sat there, my coffee going cold in my hands. Marcus had called the police on Emily, either out of spite or to protect himself, and now my daughter was potentially in legal trouble. For something she'd talked about doing but hadn't actually done. For something that, if I was being honest with myself, I'd made so easy by being a pushover for so long. I called Emily's phone. It rang 4 times, then went to voicemail. I tried again, same result. I sent a text. Emily, we need to talk. Marcus called the police. Call me back. I watched the screen, saw the message deliver, saw the read receipt show up almost immediately, but no response came. The day crawled by. I tried to do things, to distract myself with chores and tasks, but I kept coming back to my phone, checking for a response that never came. I stood in the hallway multiple times, looking at that locked guest room door, thinking about the key inside, about the symbolism of being locked out of my own space by my daughter's anger. Around 4 in the afternoon, my phone finally rang. Dad? Emily, thank God. Are you okay? I'm fine. I'm in Florida. We made good time. Her voice was flat, emotionless. I got your text. What did Marcus do? I explained about the police call, about Detective Mitchell, about the fraud report. There was silence on the other end, a long, heavy silence that felt like judgment. Of course he did, she said finally. Of course he turned on me the second things got real. God, I'm such an idiot. Where are you now? Are you still with him? No. He dropped me at a hotel in Jacksonville and said he needed to sort some things out. I haven't heard from him since this morning. I think he's dumped me, Dad. I think he used me to get a free trip to Florida and then bailed. The anger I'd been holding at bay came roaring back. That piece of, don't, just don't. I deserve it. I deserve all of this. I was planning to steal from you, Dad. Maybe not seriously, maybe not really, but I was entertaining the idea. I was talking about it like it was a joke, like your money and your trust were things I could just take for granted. And now I'm stuck in Florida with no money, no boyfriend, and potentially facing fraud charges for something I didn't actually do. Emily, listen to me. I'm going to fix this. I'll talk to the police, explain that this was a misunderstanding, that Marcus was lying. You're not going to face charges. Why would you do that? After everything I said, everything I did? It was a fair question, one I'd been asking myself all day. Why would I help her? She'd shown me such contempt, such casual cruelty. She'd thrown away our relationship for a boy who'd abandoned her the first chance he got. She'd made it clear that she viewed me as an obstacle, a source of money and guilt to be manipulated and overcome. But she was still my daughter. Still the girl I'd rocked to sleep, taught to ride a bike, walked down the aisle of her preschool graduation. Still Martha's daughter, the last living piece of the woman I'd loved more than life itself. And maybe, just maybe, this was the wake-up call she needed. The consequence that would finally break through her sense of entitlement and make her understand what she'd been throwing away. Because you're my daughter, I said simply. And because I love you, even when you make it very hard to like you. She started crying then, real tears I could hear even through the phone. Dad, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry for everything. You were right, I've been awful. I've been selfish and mean, and I took advantage of you. And now I'm paying for it, and I deserve to pay for it. Nobody deserves to be abandoned in a strange city with no resources. Emily, not even you, as angry as I am. What am I supposed to do? I don't have money for a hotel after tonight. I don't have money to get home. I can't even afford food. I thought about my retirement savings, about the money I'd protected so carefully. I thought about the locked guest room door and the key inside. I thought about Marcus calling the police, about Emily's tear-stained face last night, about the Friday Night Lights game, and how good it had felt to be part of something larger than my own troubles. I'll wire you money for a bus ticket home, I said, and money for a hotel until the bus leaves. But that's it, Emily. When you get back here, things are going to be different. Do you understand? Yes, I understand. Thank you, Dad. Thank you so much. We talked logistics for a few more minutes, agreed on an amount and how to transfer it. After I hung up, I went online and sent her $500, enough for a bus ticket, a cheap hotel, and some meals. I wondered if I was being foolish again, if this was just another chapter in a long story of me enabling her bad behavior. But what was the alternative? Leave her stranded? Force her to figure it out on her own? Maybe that would have been the right move, the tough love that would finally teach her responsibility. But I couldn't do it. I wasn't built that way. I went back upstairs and stood in front of the locked guest room door again. I'd have to call a locksmith on Monday, have them come out and open it. It would cost money I didn't want to spend on something so stupid. But I couldn't break the door down, couldn't damage something I'd built with my own hands, just because my daughter's anger had made a mess of things. I put my hand flat against the door, feeling the solid wood, the craftsmanship I'd put into it 2 decades ago. Behind that door was a key, and beyond that key was access to my home. But standing there, I realized the real lock wasn't on the guest room. The real lock was on my relationship with Emily, and I had no idea where to find that key. The house settled into evening silence. I made myself dinner, watched some television without really seeing it, and eventually went to bed. But sleep was hard to find, and when it came, it was fitted with dreams of locked doors and lost keys, of daughters who walked away and never looked back, of choices made and unmade and made again until there was no clear path forward, only a maze of doors that all looked the same. Sunday morning came gray and cold, the kind of November day that promises snow but doesn't deliver. I woke early again, a habit I couldn't break even on weekends, and lay in bed listening to the silence. Emily wouldn't be home until Tuesday, according to the bus schedule. 2 more days of this quiet. 2 more days to figure out what I was going to say when she got here, how I was going to enforce the boundaries I claimed I was setting. I got up, made coffee, and stood at the kitchen window watching the neighbors across the street load their car for church. The Petersons, married 40 years, 3 kids and 7 grandchildren. Mrs. Peterson had brought me a casserole after Martha died, told me if I ever needed anything to just ask. I'd never taken her up on it. Too proud or too independent or too determined to prove I could handle things on my own. Looking at them now, seeing how Mr. Peterson helped his wife into the car, how they moved together with the ease of long partnership, I felt a sharp stab of loneliness. I'd been alone for so long, I'd forgotten how to be anything else. After Martha died, I'd thrown myself into work, into being Emily's father, into the routines and rituals that made up a life. But what was I beyond those things? Who was Robert Hayes when he wasn't punching a clock or cooking dinner for a daughter who didn't appreciate it? The question bothered me more than it should have. I was 58 years old, close to retirement, and I had no idea what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. Travel? I'd never been anywhere. Hobbies? I'd never had time to develop any. Friends? Most of my friends from the plant had moved away or fallen out of touch. Our conversations limited to nods in the parking lot and small talk during breaks. I spent the morning cleaning, scrubbing the kitchen until it gleamed, vacuuming carpets that didn't need vacuuming, organizing closets that were already organized. Anything to keep my hands busy and my mind from dwelling on the locked door upstairs, on my daughter in some hotel in Florida, on the conversation we'd have to have when she got home. Around noon, my phone rang. Unknown number, but I answered anyway. Mr. Hayes, this is Gary Morrison. I don't know if you remember me, but I was your son-in-law for about 5 minutes back in the early 90s. I did remember him. Emily's first serious boyfriend, a boy I'd actually liked. Someone with plans and ambitions and a genuine respect for Emily. They dated in high school, had even gotten engaged briefly during Emily's first year of college before she broke it off and broke his heart in the process. Gary, of course I remember. How are you? I'm good, sir. Really good. I'm living in Columbus now, working as an architect. I'm actually calling because I heard Emily was having some trouble, and I wanted to reach out. My guard went up immediately. Where did you hear that? Small town, Mr. Hayes. I still have friends in Dayton. They heard about the situation with Marcus, about Emily heading to Florida. I just wanted to make sure she was okay. I didn't know what to say. The fact that the story was already circulating made me angry, made me want to protect Emily's privacy, even as I was furious with her choices. But Gary's voice was genuine, concerned without being nosy, and I found myself relaxing slightly. She's okay. Stranded in Florida temporarily, but she'll be home in a few days. Good, that's good. Look, sir, I know it's not my place to say anything, but Emily's a good person. She's just lost, I think. When we were together, she was trying so hard to be what everyone expected her to be. Her mom was sick, you were working all the time, and Emily felt like she had to be perfect to make up for all the chaos. I think she never really figured out who she was outside of those expectations. The observation hit home harder than I wanted to admit. You might be right about that. If she needs anything, or if you need anything, I'm happy to help. I know we're not family anymore, but Emily was important to me once. She's the reason I became an architect, actually. She used to talk about how you rebuilt your house, how you could take something broken and make it better than new. That stuck with me. We talked for a few more minutes, and by the time I hung up, I felt oddly lighter. Gary had moved on, built a good life, found success and presumably happiness. He'd loved Emily once and survived her leaving. Maybe there was a lesson in that, some proof that people could heal from heartbreak and betrayal. The rest of Sunday passed slowly. I watched football, made dinner, checked my phone compulsively for messages from Emily that didn't come. Evening fell, and I found myself back upstairs, standing in front of the guest room door again. It had become a ritual, this standing and looking, as if the door would magically open if I stared at it long enough. I tried the handle one more time, knowing it was locked, knowing it was futile. But this time, something was different. The door moved, just slightly, not opening but shifting inward, as if it wasn't quite latched. Hope surged through me, irrational and bright. I pushed harder, and the door swung open. For a moment, I just stood there, stunned. Then I realized what must have happened. The latch hadn't fully engaged when the draft pushed the door closed. It had seemed locked, but it was just stuck, the old mechanism not quite catching properly. I'd been locked out for a day and a half by a door that was never actually locked, by my own assumption and lack of persistence. I laughed then, a bitter sound in the empty house. Of course the door hadn't been locked. Of course I'd wasted all this time and energy on a problem that didn't really exist, on a barrier that was more psychological than physical. I went into the room and found the key almost immediately. It was sitting on top of a box of old Christmas decorations, right where it must have landed when Emily threw it. I picked it up, feeling its weight in my palm, turning it over. Such a small thing to cause so much stress, so much symbolic meaning. But finding the key wasn't the victory I'd expected. If anything, it made me feel more foolish. I'd spent 2 days imagining that door as an impenetrable barrier, as some metaphor for my relationship with Emily, when all I'd needed to do was push a little harder, try a little more persistently. How much of my life had been like that? How many problems had I made worse by assuming they were insurmountable? I left the key on my dresser and went to bed early, exhausted by emotions I didn't fully understand. Tomorrow was Monday, back to work, back to routine. I could lose myself in the assembly line, in the rhythmic work that didn't require thought or feeling. Just 8 hours of mechanical repetition, then home to the empty house to wait for Tuesday. But sleep was elusive again. I lay in the dark, thinking about Martha, about the early years when everything had seemed so full of promise. We'd been young and in love and certain that hard work and dedication could overcome any obstacle. She'd supported me through the hard times at the plant, through the layoffs and the strikes and the uncertainty. She'd made this house a home, filled it with warmth and laughter and the smell of Sunday pot roast. After she died, I'd tried to preserve that feeling, to keep everything exactly as she'd left it. Her clothes still hung in the closet. Her toiletries still sat on the bathroom counter. Her recipe cards still filled the box in the kitchen drawer. I'd told myself I was honoring her memory, but maybe I'd just been afraid to move forward, afraid to admit that life went on even after loss. Emily had grown up in a museum to her mother, surrounded by artifacts of a woman she barely remembered. What must that have been like for her? To be constantly compared to someone who could never disappoint anymore, who existed only in carefully curated memories and photographs. I'd never thought about it that way, never considered how my grief might have shaped her in ways I didn't intend. Around midnight, I got up and went to Martha's closet. I stood there for a long moment, looking at the dresses I'd bought her over the years, the shoes she'd worn to church, the purse she'd carried every day. Then, slowly, I started taking things down. I folded each item carefully, placed them in boxes I found in the garage. By the time I was done, 3 hours later, Martha's side of the closet was empty except for one dress, the blue one she'd worn to Emily's high school graduation. That one I kept, hung in the center of the rod where I could see it, but where it wasn't crowding out the space. I stood back and looked at the empty closet, felt something shift in my chest. Not relief exactly, and not closure. Maybe just acknowledgement. Acknowledgement that Martha was gone and had been for 22 years, that holding onto her things wasn't holding onto her, that Emily deserved a father who lived in the present, not in a shrine to the past. I went downstairs and pulled out the file cabinet in my office, the one where I kept important documents. Birth certificates, the deed to the house, my will. I'd made that will 5 years ago, shortly after Emily graduated high school. Standard stuff. Everything to Emily when I died, her as executor, her as beneficiary of my life insurance and retirement accounts. But as I looked at it now, at the date and the language, I realized it didn't reflect reality anymore. The will was written for a different Emily, or maybe a different version of our relationship. It assumed she'd be responsible, that she'd honor my legacy, that she'd use the inheritance wisely. Current evidence suggested otherwise. I pulled out a legal pad and started making notes. I wasn't going to disinherit Emily, not exactly. But I could create some structure, some conditions. A trust that paid out over time, tied to milestones. Provisions that required financial counseling, proof of employment, evidence of responsibility. If I died tomorrow, she'd still be taken care of, but she'd have to prove she deserved it. She'd have to grow up. As I wrote, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Clarity. I'd spent so many years reacting to Emily, trying to keep her happy, trying to prevent her from experiencing any pain or hardship. But in doing so, I'd robbed her of the chance to develop resilience, to learn from consequences, to become a full person instead of a perpetual child. The question was whether it was too late, whether Emily at 22 could still learn those lessons, whether our relationship could survive the teaching of them. I worked on my notes until dawn started lightening the windows, until my coffee had gone cold and my hand cramped from writing. Then I showered, dressed for work, and headed to the plant. Monday stretched ahead, 8 hours of repetitive work, of hands moving without thought while my mind wandered. But this time, the routine didn't comfort me. This time, I felt like I was counting down, measuring the distance between who I'd been and who I might become. Tuesday was coming, Emily was coming home, and everything was about to change one way or another. Tuesday morning arrived with snow flurries, light but persistent, coating everything in a thin white layer. I'd taken the day off work, told my supervisor I had a family emergency. He didn't ask questions, just approved it with a nod. After 35 years, I'd earned the benefit of the doubt. Emily's bus was scheduled to arrive at 3:15 at the Greyhound station downtown. I spent the morning in a state of nervous energy, cleaning things that were already clean, rehearsing conversations in my head that never came out right. I decided not to pick her up, had instead wired her money for a taxi. She needed to make the effort to come home, needed to take responsibility for getting herself here. Around 2 o'clock, I went to my office and pulled out the envelope I'd prepared. Inside was a printed copy of the notes I'd made Sunday night, the framework for a new will, along with a letter I'd written and rewritten a dozen times. I sealed the envelope and wrote Emily's name on it in my careful handwriting. Then I went upstairs to the guest room, the one with the door that had seemed locked but wasn't. I'd called a real estate attorney yesterday, asked about trusts and conditional inheritances. She'd been helpful, explained the options, agreed to draw up formal documents if I decided to proceed. The consultation had cost $200, money I didn't particularly want to spend, but knowledge was worth the investment. I placed the envelope on the dresser in the guest room, propped against the mirror where Emily would see it immediately. Then I went to my bedroom and did something I'd been planning since Sunday. I took the spare key, the one Emily had thrown, and I put it back in the kitchen drawer where it belonged. But before I closed the drawer, I took a photograph of it with my phone, proof of its location, proof that access to my home was available but not automatic. At 3:30, I heard a car pull into the driveway. I was sitting in the living room, had positioned myself so I could see the front door, but wasn't directly facing it. I wanted to give Emily space to enter, space to process being back. The door opened, and she came in slowly, dragging a small suitcase behind her. She looked terrible, hair unwashed, clothes wrinkled, dark circles under her eyes. She saw me and stopped, her hand still on the doorknob. "Hi, Dad. Hi, sweetheart. How was the trip?" "Long, uncomfortable. The bus broke down in Tennessee, and we had to wait 3 hours for a replacement." She closed the door, set her suitcase down. "I'm really tired. Is it okay if I go upstairs and rest? I gestured toward the stairs. Of course, your room is the way you left it. She nodded, grabbed her suitcase, and headed for the stairs. Then she paused, turned back. Dad, I'm really sorry. For everything. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I needed to say it. I know you are, Emily. We'll talk after you've rested. She went upstairs, and I heard her bedroom door close. I stayed on the couch, waiting, listening to the sounds of the house. After about 15 minutes, I heard her door open, heard her footsteps in the hallway. Then silence. I knew she'd found the guest room open, knew she was probably reading the envelope right now. Several minutes passed. Then I heard a sound I couldn't quite identify. Something between a gasp and a sob. More silence. Then footsteps on the stairs, faster now. And Emily appeared in the living room doorway holding the envelope, her face pale. Dad, what is this? Sit down, Emily. Please. She sat on the edge of the couch, as far from me as she could get while still being in the same room. She was holding the envelope like it might bite her. Is this real? Are you really going to disinherit me? I'm not disinheriting you. Read the letter more carefully. She pulled out the papers, scanned through them again. I watched emotions play across her face. Confusion, hurt, anger, and then something that might have been understanding. A trust with conditions? I have to prove I'm employed for 6 months before I get anything. I have to attend financial counseling. You have to prove you're responsible, yes. That you've learned to manage money, to hold a job, to function as an adult. But this is everything. The house, your savings, the life insurance. You're putting it all in a trust that I might never have full access to. You'll have access when you've demonstrated you can handle it. The trust will pay for your living expenses in the meantime, as long as you're meeting the conditions. But if you want full control, you have to earn it. She stood up, pacing now. I can't believe this. After everything, you're still trying to control me? Still trying to force me to be who you want me to be? Emily, sit down. Let me explain. Explain what? That you don't trust me? That you think I'm irresponsible and incompetent? I think you're young and you've made some bad choices. I think I've enabled those choices by always bailing you out, by never letting you face real consequences. And I think if I die tomorrow and leave you $400,000 with no strings attached, you'll blow through it in 2 years and have nothing to show for it. The bluntness of my words hung in the air. Emily stared at me, her mouth slightly open, the papers crinkling in her hands. You really believe that? You really think I'm that much of a screw-up? I think you haven't had to be responsible yet, so you haven't learned how. It's not your fault entirely. It's mine for making everything too easy, for removing every obstacle before you could learn to navigate around them. She sank back onto the couch, deflating. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything right now. Just listen. I leaned forward, my hands clasped between my knees. I've spent the last 3 days thinking about our relationship, about where we went wrong. I've realized that I've been trying to give you the life I never had, trying to spare you every hardship I faced. But in doing that, I robbed you of something important. I robbed you of the chance to struggle, to fail, to learn that you're strong enough to survive difficulty. So this is for my own good? This trust in these conditions? Yes, but not just yours. Mine too. Emily, I need to know that when I'm gone, you'll be okay. That you won't end up broke and desperate. That you won't get taken advantage of by people like Marcus. This trust isn't about control. It's about giving you a framework, a path to follow until you're ready to walk on your own. She was crying now, quiet tears streaming down her face. What if I never meet the conditions? What if I can't? You can. I believe that absolutely. You're smart and capable, and you've just never had to prove it before. But you will. And when you do, everything I've built, everything I've saved, will be yours completely. Not because I died and left it to you, but because you earned it. And if I don't meet the conditions, what happens to everything? I took a deep breath, knowing this part would hurt her most. Then it goes to charity, to organizations that help veterans, families in need, kids who need scholarships. It goes to people who will use it to build better lives, the way I used my opportunities to build this one. She looked at me like I'd slapped her. You'd really do that? You'd really give everything to strangers instead of your own daughter? If my own daughter proved she couldn't be trusted with it, yes, Emily, I would. Because at that point, it wouldn't be helping you. It would be enabling your self-destruction. And I love you too much to do that. The silence that followed was absolute. Emily sat there, papers in her lap, tears on her face, looking at me like she was seeing me for the first time. Maybe she was. Maybe this was the first time I'd been honest with her about my fears, my disappointments, my hopes. I don't know if I can do this, she said finally, her voice small. Yes, you can. And I'll help you. I'll be here every step of the way. But I won't do it for you anymore. Emily, I won't solve your problems or bail you out or pretend that your choices don't have consequences. What if I fail? Then you fail. And then you get up and try again. That's what life is, sweetheart. That's what your mother and I learned the hard way, and what I should have taught you all along. She wiped her eyes, straightened her shoulders. Okay, I'll do it. The trust, the conditions, all of it. But I have one condition of my own. I raised an eyebrow. And what's that? You have to promise to live. Actually live, not just work and wait. Take a trip, make some friends, go to more football games. Show me that this life you've built is worth inheriting, that it's more than just a house and a bank account. The request caught me off guard. I'd expected resistance, anger, maybe even her walking out again. But this demand that I change too, that I invest in my own happiness, was something I hadn't anticipated. That seems fair, I said after a moment. And you have to talk to me. Really talk, not just about bills and responsibilities. Tell me about Mom, about your life before I was born, about who Robert Hayes is when he's not being my father. I think I can do that. She nodded, stood up. I'm going to go rest now. For real this time. But Dad? Yes, thank you. For not giving up on me. For believing I can be better. Always, sweetheart. Always. She went upstairs, and I heard her bedroom door close, softer this time. I sat in the living room as the afternoon light faded, as the snow continued to fall outside, thinking about second chances and new beginnings. The envelope was still on the couch where Emily had left it. I picked it up, looked at the papers inside. Tomorrow I'd call the attorney, have her draw up the formal documents. But tonight, right now, it was just an idea, a possibility, a framework for a different kind of relationship. My phone buzzed. A text from Emily. Can we order pizza for dinner? Like we used to when I was little? I smiled, typed back. Pepperoni and mushroom? You remember. I remember everything, sweetheart. I ordered the pizza, then went to the kitchen and started making a salad. As I chopped lettuce and tomatoes, I thought about Martha, about what she'd say if she could see us now. I thought she'd be proud, maybe. Proud that I'd finally found the courage to set boundaries, to demand that Emily meet me halfway instead of carrying her the whole distance. The pizza arrived 45 minutes later. Emily came downstairs in clean clothes, her hair still damp from a shower. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where we'd eaten 1,000 meals together. And for the first time in months, maybe years, we actually talked. Not about money or jobs or responsibilities, but about everything else. About her favorite classes in college, about friends I'd never heard of, about dreams she'd had as a kid that she'd forgotten until now. She told me about Marcus, about how he'd seemed so confident and worldly, how she'd been drawn to that because she'd felt so lost herself. She told me about feeling like she'd failed me by not having a clear career path, by not being the perfect daughter she thought I wanted. And I told her about the early days with Martha, about working 2 jobs to save for a house, about the fear I'd felt when Emily was born, wondering if I'd be a good enough father. You were a great father, Dad, she said, picking at her pizza crust. You are a great father. I just couldn't see it because I was too busy being angry at you for not being Mom. The admission hung between us, honest and painful and necessary. I couldn't be her, I said. I tried, but I couldn't. And maybe I made you pay for that in ways I didn't realize. Maybe we both made mistakes. Maybe that's okay. We finished dinner, cleaned up together, and then sat in the living room watching an old movie neither of us really cared about. But it wasn't about the movie. It was about being in the same room, about choosing to stay instead of running away. Around 10, Emily yawned and stood up. I'm exhausted. I think I'm going to bed. Okay, sweetheart. Sleep well. She paused at the bottom of the stairs. Dad, that thing you said before, about actually living? I think you should start with that trip. Go somewhere you've always wanted to see. Like where? I don't know, Washington, D.C.? You always talked about wanting to see the monuments, all the history. I considered it. I'd never been to D.C., despite having served in the Army, despite a lifetime of patriotic rhetoric and flag-waving. It had always seemed like something for other people, for tourists, not for a factory worker from Ohio. Maybe I will, I said. Maybe we both will. When you've got some time off from your job. My job I don't have yet. The job you're going to get. I believe in you, Emily. Do you believe in you? She smiled, and it was real, reaching her eyes. I'm starting to. She went upstairs, and I sat in the quiet house, listening to it settle around me. The furnace kicked on, warm air pushing through the vents. Outside, the snow had stopped, leaving everything clean and white and new. I thought about the envelope upstairs, about the trust and the conditions and the hard conversations still to come. I thought about Emily's promise to try and my promise to live. I thought about Martha, about the life we'd built together and the life I'd tried to preserve after she was gone. But mostly, I thought about tomorrow, about the possibility of starting over, of building something different and maybe better. Not a museum to the past, but a real home where real people made real mistakes and learned from them. Where a father could admit he didn't have all the answers, and a daughter could admit she needed help finding hers. I stayed downstairs for another hour, just sitting, just being. Eventually, I went up to bed, but before I did, I stopped at Emily's door. I could hear her breathing, soft and even, the sound that had comforted me for 22 years whenever I was scared or worried or lost. Good night, sweetheart, I whispered, knowing she couldn't hear me. Tomorrow's going to be better. I promise. And as I said it, I realized I believed it. Not because the problems were solved or because everything was suddenly perfect, but because we'd finally started being honest with each other. Finally started treating each other like real people instead of roles we were supposed to play. I went to my room, changed into sleep clothes, and lay down. The house was quiet, but it was a good quiet now, full of possibility instead of absence. I closed my eyes and thought about football games and pizza dinners, about trips to Washington, D.C., and conversations over coffee, about a daughter who was learning to stand on her own and a father who was learning to let her. Sleep came easier that night, and my dreams were gentle, full of the kind of hope that comes from surviving something hard and finding that you're still standing. Martha was in those dreams, smiling in that way she had, not saying anything but somehow saying everything. And when I woke the next morning to weak winter sunlight, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, ready. Ready for whatever came next, ready to live instead of just exist. Ready to be the father Emily needed instead of the one I thought she wanted. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be setbacks and arguments, moments when I'd want to give in and moments when she'd want to give up. But we'd face them together, as equals, as people who'd learned that love isn't about control or conditions or keeping score. It's about showing up day after day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. And for the first time in a long time, I was ready to show up. 6 months later, on a warm May evening, I stood in the garage attaching a bike rack to the back of my truck. Emily was inside packing sandwiches and water bottles for the trip to D.C. we'd been planning since February. She'd gotten a job at a local nonprofit in January, doing social media and fundraising, and had stuck with it through the difficult adjustment period. She'd moved into an apartment in March, a small place near downtown that she split with a roommate she'd met through work. The trust was still in place, the formal documents signed and filed away. Emily had met every condition so far, had even exceeded some of them. She'd attended financial counseling, opened her own savings account, started contributing to a retirement fund. She'd called me every Sunday night, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. And me? I'd kept my promise too. I'd been to 3 more football games, had joined a bowling league through the plant, had even gone on a date with a woman from church, though nothing had come of it. I'd learned to cook 3 new recipes, had started volunteering at the Veterans of Foreign Wars Hall on Tuesday evenings, had begun to build a life that extended beyond work and worry. Emily came out to the garage carrying a cooler. "Ready to hit the road, old man." "As ready as I'll ever be. You got the map?" "Dad, we have GPS. Nobody uses maps anymore. I like maps. They don't run out of battery." She laughed, that genuine laugh I'd missed for so long. "Fine, I brought a map too. Just for you." We loaded everything into the truck, double-checked that we had everything we needed. As I backed out of the driveway, I looked at the house, at the place I'd spent 40 years of my life building and maintaining. It looked good, the paint fresh, the lawn neat, the flag on the porch hanging straight and proud. But it was just a house now, not a shrine or a prison. Just a place I lived, a place I could leave and return to, a place that would be there when I got back, but didn't define who I was. "What are you thinking about?" Emily asked as we pulled onto the highway. "Your mother. She would have liked this, us taking a trip together." "Yeah, she would have." "Tell me a story about her. Something I don't know." So I did. I told her about the time Martha and I had driven to Chicago on a whim, how we'd gotten lost and ended up in Indiana, how we'd laughed until we cried and then kept driving, not caring where we ended up. I told her about the dreams Martha had, about opening a bakery, about writing a cookbook, about all the things she'd wanted to do that cancer had stolen from her. Emily was quiet for a while after I finished, looking out the window at Ohio rolling past. Then she said, "I wish I remembered her better. I was so young when she died." "You have her smile," I said, "and her stubborn streak. Trust me, you're more like her than you know." "Is that good or bad?" "It's good, sweetheart. It's all good." We drove for hours, trading stories in silence, stopping at rest stops and diners, taking back roads just to see where they led. And somewhere around the Ohio-Pennsylvania border, as the sun was setting and painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, I realized something. I was happy. Not perfectly happy, not without complications or concerns, but genuinely, honestly happy. Happy to be on this road with my daughter, happy to have a future to look forward to, happy to have survived the locked doors and lost keys and all the other obstacles that had seemed insurmountable in the moment. "Thanks for coming with me," I said. Emily looked over, surprised. "Thanks for inviting me. Thanks for everything, really. For not giving up on me when you had every reason to. You're my daughter, Emily. I'll never give up on you. Even when you drive me crazy." "That's good to know," she said with a grin. "Because I'm probably going to drive you crazy a lot more before I'm done. I'm counting on it." We drove into the night, toward Washington, toward monuments and history and memories we hadn't made yet. Behind us, Dayton got smaller in the rearview mirror, but it never disappeared completely. It would always be there, always be home, always be the place where we'd learned that sometimes you have to lose everything before you can find what really matters. And what really matters, I'd learned, isn't the house or the money or the perfect life you'd planned. It's the people you love and the second chances you give them. It's the courage to set boundaries and the grace to accept that nobody's perfect. It's the wisdom to know when to hold on and when to let go. It's the key you thought was lost but was there all along, waiting for you to be brave enough to push the door open and step through into whatever comes next.